So with that, I'll go ahead and start with our online speakers first. So we have Jason A. Higgins. He's Digital Scholarship Coordinator at Virginia Tech Publishing. Do you want to give a quick intro, Jason?
I am Jason Higgins. I'm the Digital Scholarship Coordinator for Virginia Tech Publishing, and I manage our journals. And we publish more than 10 scholarly journals, from professional journals to graduate student-run journals, as well as undergraduate journals. I'm also the faculty supervisor for the Virginia Tech Undergraduate Historical Review. This is a service position through my joint affiliation with the History Department.
Wonderful, thank you. And next we have Amanda B. MacDonald, who's Associate Professor and Assistant Director of Undergraduate Research Initiatives, also at Virginia Tech University Libraries. Amanda, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yes, thank you. So I actually am the person probably on this panel that doesn't actually run a student-led journal. My work at Virginia Tech really supports the Office of Undergraduate Research in helping to prepare students to be able to write and present and disseminate their research in a variety of ways. So I'll be talking about that, and then I'll also talk about my work as the faculty lead for student digital credentialing at Virginia Tech.
Wonderful. And next in person, we have Dr. Michael Plankey, who is the founder of the Georgetown Medical Review and also a professor at Georgetown University. Do you want to intro?
So thank you. I've been at Georgetown 20 years. I'm a clinical infectious disease epidemiologist. I'm pretty well established in terms of the number of publications and the number of funds that I bring in to Georgetown to do my research. Dave Millsman, who was an ER doc at the time in 2016, we kind of toyed around and eventually formed Georgetown Medical Review, or GMR. And here we are coming around to almost our 10th year.
That's exciting. And we actually work with GMR at Scholastica, so it's exciting to meet Michael in person. And we also have William Breichner, journals publisher at Johns Hopkins University Press.
Thank you. Good to be here. We publish 113 journals, mostly in the humanities, social sciences. You may know our online platform, Project Muse. Project Muse is a collection of about 730 journals, humanities journals primarily. Started at Hopkins in the early 90s. We also do distribution for other university presses, and we also manage memberships for 30 professional societies. So it's the largest program of any US-based university press, maybe not financially, but in terms of the number of journals we publish.
Very cool. Okay, well, thank you all to all of our speakers for joining, and to kind of jump right into the discussion. I thought it would be interesting to start by talking about the stages of student-run journal programs, since the concept of sort of leveling up that we're talking about is sort of relative to the stage you're at, right? So I wanted to start out by talking about the key components of an early stage student-run journal with the potential to become a more professionalized publication with staying power, kind of not just a project. And I was wondering, Jason and Amanda, if you could both start by talking about what you think are sort of the key components of an early stage journal with a lot of potential.
Shall I go first, Amanda? Okay. Sure, I'd be happy to jump in and talk about that. And the way we think through Virginia Tech Publishing, now Virginia Tech University Press, we just recently joined the Association of University Presses. So we do have a proposal process. So anyone who is planning to start or launch a new journal or reinvigorate an old one, they must go through a proposal process, and then that gets reviewed by our board. Included in a proposal, and I'm thinking specifically for undergraduate journals, they will need to identify a faculty supervisor. What, if any, departmental resources are available to sustain the journal? We encourage them early to identify editorial board members. Everything that we publish is open access and peer reviewed. So we want to know what their model for reviewing scholarship will be like at an undergraduate level. And we talk about things like open access and copyright and things like that. We also want to know about how many scholarly articles, book reviews, or other types of publications they expect to publish per year, because all of our journals are funded by Virginia Tech University Libraries. So we include in our annual budget an estimate of the cost of publication for each of our journals. For example, the Journal of Veteran Studies publishes over 50 articles a year without any APCs to the authors. So as you might imagine, that becomes quite costly. Most of our undergraduate journals are not operating at that level. They publish between 5 to 10 articles per year. We also want to know estimated lengths of articles, or will there be any multimedia? We specialize in digital scholarship at Virginia Tech. So we want to know what kind of media they expect to publish. And all of that helps us plan, but it also helps people proposing a journal to think through the details early on about how they plan to sustain it. So maybe I can talk more at another point about how the Virginia Tech Undergraduate Historical Review sustains itself. As the faculty editor, whenever I came on as a volunteer, I found that process to be inefficient at best. So I wanted to reinvigorate it and make sure that there was a model in place. That way we could ensure that whenever students graduate, or graduate students who help run that journal graduate, that we have a model in place for training, for resources, for learning, for conducting workshops, and how to make sure that there's longevity in the journal. But I can talk more about that at a later point.
Great.
Yeah, that
And
would be
then-
great.
Yeah, I was just going to add in. So on the other side, I'll kind of share just briefly about the landscape of research for undergraduates at our institution. And so I work, even though I'm in university libraries, I'm in a different department than Jason, and I serve as the liaison to the Office of Undergraduate Research. And through that work, I provide a variety of training and support to students and faculty who are doing research on that front end before they're ready to think about publication. So I would say probably the most directly related work that I do is I offer a training series for scientific writing where each workshop is a piece of what would eventually go into a publication for students. So the first one is like introduction to scientific writing, to kind of let them know what this looks like. What is this process all about? What would it take for me as a student to be able to write an article that was ready for publication? And then other workshops are like writing a literature review, writing a proposal, presenting and interpreting data, compiling a method section, and then publishing a peer-reviewed article. So that's the type of training and support that in my role that I provide to students that are interested in engaging in the publishing process.
Awesome. Yeah. So hearing a lot about good training and good kind of plans to start. You have to have that strategy to start for sure. And I know, Michael, that you have extensive experience supporting a student-run journal through GMR. I was wondering if you could share, how did you know when you had sort of the foundations editorial-wise and training-wise, as they're talking about, to be able to begin sort of leveling up or professionalizing the journal, and where did you start?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you the real truth about this. So GMR was started by, the idea came from Dave Millsman, who was an ER doc, who was a researcher. And before 2016, he came to me and he said, I'm interested in starting this journal. And I thought, okay, well, that's all well and good, but what's really the purpose? What's the mission? What's the purpose of this? And then, he went about his business and I was busy. And then we circled back because he then wanted to take some of his students that he had mentored and archive the papers that the students wrote. So really, GMR really became Dave Millsman's students' archival system. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go along with the ride on this. And then Dave unexpectedly left Georgetown. And so then I thought, oh, good God, I'm going to have to do something with this. Either I'm going to let this kind of die, or I'm going to actually think about how we could, what the mission, how we could improve GMR to be more encapsulating of the broader student base and capture papers that students were writing that were not mentored by Dr. Milsman, but other investigators that wouldn't necessarily meet the bar for peer review. And lots of medical student research falls into that category. Good hypothesis, good study design, but results and implications and impact, wouldn't make the bar, wouldn't make it. And so I thought there's a platform, there is a need for disseminating this work. This was also in concert with the fact that about 14 years ago, they instituted an independent scholarly project for all students to do before they graduate with their MD degree at Georgetown. So there's a variety of things that students do in terms of the complexity of research, from case reports, case series to hypothesis-driven research. So there was that avenue, and there was a building of a research feeling at Georgetown School of Medicine that kind of intersected with the fact that GMR was needed. So that's how we kind of established ourselves.
Awesome. Yeah, I think finding a niche as a journal, whether student or just, professional journals as well, it's such a big thing. It'll make a lot of sort of make or break your success in a lot of ways. And GMR has certainly found its niche. And I know, we've been talking about this idea of moving from an early stage journal to a professionalized publication. I want to kind of unpack that a little bit more. And we're very lucky to have Bill here with us from Johns Hopkins University Press. I know, Bill, throughout your career, you've worked with many, many journals. I was wondering if you can sort of break down, I know this is a big question, but break down the key phases of publication maturation and the most kind of critical development areas for journals to focus on at those different points.
Sure. That process isn't that much different from a student publication to a regular, I say regular, but to a faculty edited journal, really. So I think a couple things. Discoverability is really a huge thing. So you want to think about getting the journal indexed in the right indices. Google Scholar, places like that. That takes work, and it can be very rigorous. You want to be in Scopus. You want to be in these indices. I think, I'm not going to try to give Danielle a plug here, but having an online platform for peer review and for submission is really important for a lot of reasons. I don't know if you saw recently, the Harvard Journal Law Review is under scrutiny right now. And you want to make sure that you have a really good record of your peer review process. Because we've had situations where there's been, tenure review boards have denied tenure to a scholar, and they've come back and they wanted to have a record of a submission to a journal who the whole submission process, that the peer review process was upfront, repeatable. So a lot of it is rinse and repeat. You want to have a process in place for peer review, for submissions. You want to professionalize how you deal with your authors and your contributors. An online platform can do that. You want to get it indexed, and you want to have some good communication back with contributors. They want to know what the status of their paper is. They want to know when it might be published. That's part of being professional, because they have a lot to deal with this too, right? They've submitted that, and in journal publishing, it's bad practice. It's not, to submit your paper to multiple journals at the same time. So, you want to publish on time. So all of those things start to establish that you're more of an established publication instead of just, a hobby sort of thing. We published 2 student-edited publications. And Hopkins is different because I guess a lot of these journals are probably open access and funded by departments or the institution. We're not an open access publisher per se. We're a hybrid publisher, which means we have the option of publishing open access, but we have to pay bills and we have to give money back to those journals. We only own maybe 30 to 40 of the journals we publish. So we publish the SICE Journal of International Studies, and we publish the Georgetown Journal of International Affairs. our journals have to go through a faculty editorial board for approval. It's difficult to get a student edited journal through that board. Hopkins cares about pedigree. I mean, they do. They want tenured professors to be editors of journals. So that's why having strong leadership in terms of faculty advisor, that sort of thing is very important. So professionalization is indexing, communication with authors, a good online platform where you can trace and track the life cycle of a paper. Those are important to become professionalized. And you're going to talk about this later, I'm sure, but editorial succession is huge. There's an old saying that that the first election for a new democracy is not the most important one; it's the second, right? It's the same thing, I think, with journals. We've started a lot of journals over the years, and there's so much enthusiasm. There's so much energy. They pack a lot of their stuff into that first one or two issues, and bang, after that, reality hits. It's especially in the second semesters when you're getting ready to graduate and you're looking for a job. So yeah, that's some of the reality.
For sure. And I know our speakers will talk about too, and just something that I don't know if students are necessarily cognizant of is in sort of this professional publishing of journals, oftentimes the editors rather, are still volunteers. It's academics that are doing this as their side job in addition to all the other side projects that they're doing. So the idea of kind of keeping tabs on people, having a process for succession is also important in that role. And even at Scholastica as a software provider, we'll talk to people about that just to make sure that they'll be successful using the software when they change over. So we'll touch more on that kind of concept next. But first I did want to ask, I lied. We're going to do it right now. One of the challenges of developing student-run journals is frequent turnover of the editorial team members as the students graduate. So I wanted to ask Jason and Michael both, what advice do you have for transferring editorial and technical knowledge between team members to ensure new editors can hit the ground running? And what can students or faculty do to make that process easier? So Jason, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Sure. And a lot of my response builds off of what Michael was saying about process and online journal management systems. I think that those are really key. I also think it's really important to support students in whatever way that your institution has the capacity to do. And sometimes that requires being flexible. Whenever I started as a faculty supervisor for V2HR, all of the undergraduate editors were volunteers. That was not a sustainable model. It was hard for them to have buy-in to the growth and the output of the journal. We were fortunate that the history department offered 2 10-hour graduate assistantships to 2 graduate students who help run the journal. And a lot of that model depended on those graduate students, where they invested in the journal. That was half of their assistantship. So whenever I started, the first cohort was great. The second one didn't have as much motivation. So I had to think creatively about how to ensure longevity of the journal beyond the great graduate students who are really self-motivated. So I recently coordinated with the history department to set up internships. Unfortunately, they couldn't pay wages. I think that labor should be valued, especially students offering experiential learning opportunities to undergraduates is really one of our focuses at Virginia Tech. But we were able to offer course credit, which many were happy because they had already sometimes been working on this journal for at least a year. So at least offering course credit can help mitigate the service that they're already providing. Having documentation is really key. So those graduate students are staggered. So I have a senior graduate student and a first year MA student, and they mentor one another, and they both mentor the undergraduates. And it's really a collaborative model in which I meet with them every 2 weeks just to offer perspective, answer questions, but it really is a student-run journal. But I do offer workshops on editing. I walk them through peer review processes. I also helped establish a stronger criteria for peer review and evaluation, and making sure that the review process was replicable across articles. And this goes back to what Michael was saying about having these systems in place and being able to document it. We use Ubiquity as a service provider, so all of our journals use OJS3 open journals systems. So everything gets coordinated through the online portal. Nothing is being done over email and Google Sheets or Excel sheets, which can be problematic at times. So if an institution is investing in undergraduate research and scholarship and publishing, I would encourage them to think about online journal management systems. It makes the process not only more replicable, but much more streamlined. I could say more, but I think I want to hear what Michael has to say about that.
So I'm thinking back when we first started this. So we have history that kind of made history of medical education in the United States, changes in the preclinical education years that went from 2 years to 18 months, which kind of shook us a bit, because when we first started GMR, we were still working on a 2-year preclinical education. So when students came on board, they came on board the second semester of their first year. So they essentially had about 1.5 years of time with us, exposure time, to learn the processes of the journal, both in terms of review to the technical parts of to final publication. So like I said, we had that exposure time to train people for secession. Then I think it was in 2018, we went to 18 months, and it kind of shook us, because taking the first semester out, okay, means that the second semester, to when they leave to take their dedicated time to a study for step 1, made it very, very short. So we had to try as best as we could to bring people on the board, student-run board, to do the activities of the journal. And that squished, it demanded a lot of attention, and frankly, a lot of angst, because when you've got that short period of time and you have students that you're not necessarily sure that they've learned everything they could or should to take over, it was tough. So, I wish we had more time. And I toy around with the fact that maybe we need to bring on, independent of the fact that in the first semester of medical school, it's all really chaotic and high stress, and you want to go and get students interested in a biomedical journal when they're trying to figure out how they have to relearn how to study. I mean, it's almost impossible, frankly. But I toy about the idea of studying early, because that would give us a little bit more time to prepare students, have them learn about the publication process, and be able to successfully succeed students that are leaving. Second issue, and I have been proven wrong by a student who's actually graduating in May. Historically, at second year, all right, students fly the coop. They're in their rotations, and you know what? We don't see them. They can't come to board meetings. They're too busy to do reviews. It's succumbing to those powers of learning about patient care. So that also is a problem for us because we train people, we train students to review, we train students to potentially succeed in advancing, and then they go. So for a long time, students just left after their 18 months until this year. I think two, right? Two students. Two students actually remained on the board on the 3rd and 4th years of their medical education, attended board meetings, did reviews, were associate editors. They were fully contributing to the journal. And I was really happy about that. So we struggle to this day. And I don't necessarily think that, there will be a solution that will fit all for running a journal for biomedical papers run by biomedical or medical students.
Yeah, no, there's like unique challenges there for sure. And I know this kind of is interesting and potentially related to what Jason was talking about with giving students a credit for activities that they do. Amanda, I know that you're leading an initiative on digital credentialing for non-classroom experiences at Virginia Tech. So I was wondering if you've incorporated student publications into that work in any way, and if you think that there's an opportunity for schools in general for students and faculty editorial board members to advocate for credentialing for their programs to give perhaps more like structure or incentive.
Yeah. So I'm actually super excited that you had a question on credentialing. I feel like the last couple of years, a lot of different areas of higher education are starting to really talk about credentialing. And I think that this is another great place where I think it could be of benefit. So back in 2018, I actually collaborated with the Office of Undergraduate Research to create a program called the Undergraduate Research Excellence Program. So if you hear me say UREP, that's what it stands for. And that program is really designed to initially connect students to resources and support to get them to engage more in the research process. But we also wanted a way to be able to, as you are talking about, be able to recognize students for the hard work that they've done in a tangible way. And so the challenge is that, of course, like every big university, we have students doing research that looks really different across our different colleges. And so we had to build a program that had like multiple avenues and ways for students to get engaged with the program, to get credit for the things that they're doing. And so how it works for us at Virginia Tech is that we built this program to be voluntary. We market it through the Office of Undergraduate Research. Students self-sign up for it. And then once they're enrolled, they are signed into a Canvas course. And there are 5 categories within that course: training, conducting, disseminating, reflecting, and mentoring. And then each of those categories would have a minimum and a maximum amount of points, with the goal that a student's going to have a well-rounded research experience if you do all of those things. And so, as you can imagine, it's the disseminating portion where the student publications are part of that program and are awarded with badges. And so, a student publication is actually the highest number of points that you can get in that category. So, for us, it's worth 10 points. So, if you just did that, which in most cases, a student who's publishing a journal article wouldn't just do that for dissemination, they're probably also presenting at least locally at conferences, but maybe even going further and sharing the research at national conferences as well. And then once a student actually earns enough points to get the badge, they're awarded a badge for each of those areas. So you could get a maximum of 5 badges and then the program badge as well. And so right now, that is how it works for us credentialing a student publication. However, it's maybe slightly different than the way we've kind of talked about badging and thinking about what would it look like if we actually had a badge program within one of these journal programs. And I would say that I think would actually work really well. It's not something that I'm currently doing, but I could see that it would absolutely work and it would function. It would provide structure for students. It would be a way to actually show like different levels of engagement depending how you set up that badge program. And then for us, like, let's say theoretically we did do this at Virginia Tech. How UREP is built is that it works as an umbrella program. So if you're someone like me who also coordinates other undergrad research programs that are badged, then it can automatically feed into UREP. So it helps with that manual labor as well. So like I run a workshop series that I mentioned earlier. So if you get the badge for that workshop series and you're a student, and then the moment you sign up for UREP, that badge transfers into the training portion. And so the same thing for a journal program could work, is that if you get, some type of badge that we build to connect to UREP, that moment that you earn that badge, it would be fed to the appropriate section within UREP, and you as a student wouldn't have to do any of the work. And on the backside for faculty, once this is set up, then that work is already done. So you don't have to confirm that a student did this but didn't do that, or whatever the case may be for badging. And so I think it really would provide a nice structure for that. The other thing I would think about too is we've also mentioned career preparation here, and what good preparation this kind of work can be for students. And so when we're starting to think about building badging programs for this, I think it would be a good idea to connect it to an appropriate standard so that students can kind of see the skills that they've learned and how it connects to their careers. So maybe thinking about like the NACE career competencies, something like that, would be a really good idea when building those programs, to kind of think about how you might align it with standards for students. But also for us on the back end, so if someone says, how are you preparing students with this work to be ready for employment, you'll be able to say, oh, well, they built leadership skills, they built, mentorship skills, editing skills, that would fall in communication, technology skills, those kinds of things that I think are very easy to tag and align with standards that would be helpful to everyone involved with that credential.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's an interesting area to consider. And I know that we're getting closer to time. I do want to leave time for audience questions, so I'll curb myself to one more question. I think this seems relevant to kind of what people have been talking about all day, so I think this is a good one to end with. The idea of limited editorial bandwidth. It's a big challenge for student journals, and as we were saying, it's also a challenge for non-student journals, just in the sense that there's often lots of volunteer editors. So I wanted to ask our panel, what advice do you have for editorial teams regarding setting achievable goals that you can kind of break up and then potentially pass on to new people? I know in software development, we talk a lot about the idea of agile project management. You want your projects to be in like chunkable pieces that can be shipped, we'll say finished, and then move on to the next thing. So I'm curious to ask all of you how that applies to publishing. And Bill, I'll start with you.
I think vet those goals and your ideas. Are they achievable or not? Talk to the previous editorial team. If you're lucky enough to have a situation like Virginia Tech or our journals, they have the press, vet those with the press. Talk to your advisor. Surround yourself with reliable partners. So, some of the journals, it's funny, some of the journals have these huge editorial structures, and others are much more streamlined. So I think that's a big part of it also, is make sure you have a hierarchy that is manageable, and there's someone who can really in a position to make a decision, because there is sort of a paralysis at times where, no one's in charge. You're working with your colleagues and your peers. It's a little difficult sometimes. So again, take a look and see what was done before. Surround yourself with committed people who are going to see you through. Michael was talking about, second semester people leaving, that's huge. So make sure that the folks that you're working with are in it for the whole year or the whole volume. And again, just maybe, or SSP. That's another advice. We heard from the SSP. They'll be happy to give you advice. Or if you have a university press at your university, talk to them, or just make a contact. I'm happy. We had a woman from Stanford spend a week with us. They want to start a journal. We were happy to spend a week with that person and help them think about how to get a program started. So reach out. People in the industry love to talk about what they do. I mean, let's face it, who doesn't like to talk about, well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but a lot of people do like to talk about their job. Because, I made a joke, I don't know what my job is sometimes, so it's nice to talk about it so I can, form what it really is. But yeah, talk to people, vet it, And don't be afraid of discarding it. Don't be afraid of lopping stuff off. It's not failure. It's prudence. It's a good thing. So.
Yeah, that's really solid advice. Anybody else on the panel want to add to that, Michael?
So, I'm glad that you said something about sometimes you don't know what your job is, and that I totally am with you on that
Don't
one.
tell my director.
I know that. Okay, no, it's just from amongst us. So when we first started GMR, we were doing it on a website at Georgetown. And then I said, this is, and I had actually some experience in publication production many years ago. So I said, if we're going to do this, we have to have a platform, we have to have a review process, we have to have a tracking system and all of the things. And that's where we found Scholastica. But Danielle and I were talking about this in terms of metrics. We would love to have Scholastica built. I'm going to throw you right under the bus here. We would love to have a fully integrated system that tracks everything that we do. So we have a system where we can papers are submitted, they're sent out, they're reviewed before they get submitted to an associate editor, who then would, within the system, submit it to a reviewer. And then there would be an internal system that would follow that whole process. The system would ding us if indeed they reviews didn't come back. So basically the arc of this, from submission to publication, and have the machine do it. Because frankly, everybody who does all of this work are very busy with other things that they need to do. Correct?
Yes.
Everybody, correct? And so it would be nice to have, particularly now, technology is driven such that they could learn. Machines could learn how to do this, and you could put expectations in machine such that this machine tells you when indeed you need to pay attention, and indeed when you're not paying attention.
Yeah, for sure. And that is, as I said to Michael, it's an area we're definitely actively working on developing further. And yeah, I will say, kind of whatever, there could be a whole separate panel about the idea of machine learning to an AI, like opportunities in publishing and kind of the promises and perils. But if you want to, we could do that panel another time. But thank you for that, Michael, and definitely an important topic. Yeah, this is hopefully a good one to end on. I was wondering what advice you have to give student journals around developing relationships with library and institutional support services to leverage the resources they offer, and then also helping students if they need to make the case for external funding for things like manuscript tracking systems or other tools. So Jason, I'll field that to you.
Sure. I think it's really important to think about what the greater mission of an institution is and attempt to align your vision for a student-led journal within that. So if there's enough synergy where you can make the case that your undergraduate student journal publication actually helps a university or a library reach its goals, then I think that that's one of the most effective approaches to doing that. I realize that not every institution has the resources like for Virginia Tech, but we have two key initiatives. One involves student experiential learning and making the cost of education more affordable. And the other is promoting Virginia Tech as a global research institution. And our journals program happens to fit both of those initiatives quite neatly. If you're seeking external funding, and this is a really difficult time to be doing that with the IMLS grants being defunded, and I'll keep it positive, but I would find out what your libraries and your institutions already offer. For example, if you can't afford to invest in an online journal management system, then there may be other alternatives. So thinking about maybe WordPress could be a possible way to create a digital publication of a journal. We do have journals that have used other digital platforms such as Scalar, WordPress. We have print journals. We actually manage a project with currently incarcerated writers that we publish with print. So I think just doing the research and learning what resources are already available and then making the case about why your journal can help reach those goals is the best advice I can give you in a minute on that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure it varies by school and things of that nature too. Do you have anything to add on that, Michael?
So I agree, Jason, with the fact that the marriage, it really is a marriage between the journal and your institution. That the mission of your journal needs to be and the mission of your institution. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Really. And one of the things that I was going to mention earlier today to the group was also codifying where you are in the institution. That means who you go to, where you get your money, where you get your support. Institutional support is incredibly important. Now, currently, GMR is part of the Office of Medical Education, but today I thought to myself, as I heard, you know what, maybe there's a role of GMR in the library system at Georgetown. And I thought, oh, I never thought about that. But wherever, you know, you land, you've got to have, there's got to be a marriage between the journal, what your mission of the journal is, and what the mission of the school is.
For sure. Anything to add, Bill?
I don't know why the journal would start if you didn't. I mean, are you going to find an advisory person to do that? No, because that's where the advisory, the faculty advisory person comes in. They're your advocate. So I not only is it crucial, I think it's the very foundational thing of the journal. Otherwise, why would it even exist if you didn't have that linkage and a strong support from your faculty advisor?
For sure. Well, I hope this was helpful for everybody. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us in person and virtually. Great.